So once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Arslan Suleimanov. I'm an assistant editor at Visegrad Insight. Actually, this is my first panel that I'm moderating at Visegrad Insight, which is dedicated also to a text that I had a pleasure to contribute to, which was called "Is Kyiv Beating Budapest in Bratislava at Their Own Game," which is essentially our recent editorial analysis that we had a pleasure to compile with Wojciech Przybylski and the other people from the editorial team. So if you haven't read it yet, you'll find the link to the piece in the chat. My colleague Natalia will share this with you. Let me start with the housekeeping rules first and the structure of today's discussion. So the first part of today's discussion, which is going to be roughly 30 minutes, is going to be recorded. You can see the recording sign already on your screen, while the second part will be an off-the-record Q&A with the speakers. So you can send your questions in the chat during the discussion, or you can also raise your hand later on and address them directly by unmuting yourself. And let me just remind you that we're able to organize this kind of a discussion only thanks to the support of our subscribers. And it's crucial that the people who attend our online events join our subscribers community. And for this occasion, for the occasion of this event, we have a special promo code, which is going to be also sent to you by a chat during the discussion. And you will manage to get a 40% off from the subscription to Visegrad Insight. So let me introduce you the speakers of today's event. So Wojciech Przybylski is the editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight, and he leads the strategic foresight on EU affairs to improve democratic economic security in Europe. He also chairs the Europe Future Forum, and he is the president of the Respublika Foundation. Tomasz Kasprowicz is the editor-in-chief of Respublika Nova since 2023, and he is also a member of its editorial team since 2008. He has a PhD in finance, specializes in risk management, and earned his doctorate in the United States. So let me start with the discussion, and I am going to proceed with the first question, which is going to be directed towards Mr. Przybylski. So the precedent of Hungary and Slovakia blocking the sanctions packages is nothing new. It's almost an everyday story for several years. So why is the current situation with the 20th sanction package, why is it unique, and what do actually geoeconomics and Kyiv, Ukraine have to do with it? Not least because obviously the package also targets the shadow fleet and maritime services, while both Hungary and Slovakia are landlocked. So what's the logic behind this?
Great question, Arslan. I just want to reassure every participant in today's meeting that in our editorial office, we're on first name basis. Arslan, Wojciech, Tomasz, just that we can address each other more comfortably. And thanks, Arslan, for agreeing. This is a premiere indeed for this show, for our assistant editor to come up from the editorial shadows and agreeing to moderate this important panel. We have written, as we have written in the piece, Arslan and I co-authored for Visegrad Insight. There is, of course, a specific moment in the history of vetoing or attempts to veto sanctions with the 20th package of sanctions. That comes on one hand because there is a different structure. It's a different set of sanctions, or so substantively we have a different mechanism that would be sanctioning the existence or the permittance of the Russian fleet operating under European flags or run by European companies and anchoring and delivering the goods through European ports, which is substantially limiting Russian operations in regards to Europe and the deliveries to Europe. And that is one part of the question. The other one is that Hungary and Slovakia, being exempted for quite some time already from the sanction regime, also introduced by the Trump administration, in order to continue receiving the oil and extend the transition, the eventual transition that EU has agreed also upon from the Russia dependency to international, but by general volume, American dependency on energy deliveries. That transition now is coming to a final chapter, so to say. And as it was coming, and Hungary is also in particular in the very sensitive electoral period, Hungary saw this as a lifeboat, especially the government of Viktor Orban saw it as a lifeboat, as a vehicle, as an electoral money-making and money-distributing vehicle, based on which he's been running the electoral campaign of redistribution of some of the profits from the trade, and hurting this trade, hurting the delivery of Russian fuel to Hungarian economy, to the Hungarian oil refinery MOL, that would be then excessively taxed with a massive windfall tax that Hungarian government has been using, among others, to distribute the money in the electoral period to the electorate in order to buy votes, essentially, as the practice has been going in the past electoral terms, has been particularly unacceptable for the current leadership in Budapest. Hence, the nervousness. I would say these are the two major, in my opinion, triggers that evoked the action on the Budapest side and on the Bratislava side, not forgetting and having a particular focus on the fact that Russia has been bombing the very pipeline it has been delivering fuel with. And this situation probably requires another set of explainers, and we're going to be happy to provide one. But I'm sure Tomasz has also his analytical interpretation of what just happened.
Definitely. So thank you very much for such an interesting explanation towards this intersection. I'm sure that is going to guide the discussion. So Tomasz, Wojciech just mentioned the pipeline, and I'm assuming he's talking about the Druzhba pipeline. So in your opinion, what actually happened to this pipeline, and what are the opposing perspectives? What do Hungary, Slovakia, and Ukraine say about the incident, the quote-unquote incident?
Well, we don't know what happened. We can only suppose what happened, but that's probably not even the most important thing. What happened? We know there was some attacks. We know there was probably some damage to it. The most important thing is that the oil is not flowing. And this is a decision, to a large degree, political decision by Ukrainians. That can be justified with the attack. The question is, of course, how severe the disruption is and the destruction is. But clearly, Ukrainians are in no hurry to repair those for obvious reasons. Yeah? Because now they have a good excuse to stop this flow of oil. And this is important for Ukrainians for many reasons. Let's start with the symbolic reason of oil flowing through Ukraine that is financing killing Ukrainians. That must be clearly pretty difficult for Ukrainians to have this going on. So that's point number one. Yeah? So stopping that is important symbolically, but also economically, because the oil not flowing through Druzhba is not fueling the war. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, of course, Orban is no friend to Ukraine, and taking into consideration that he's in very precarious positions, as Wojtek mentioned, making his position even more difficult is something that is naturally in the interest of Ukraine, of course. Finally, this is also a way of forcing the final European countries to stop buying from Russia without taking the blame. Of course, the other side is claiming that of course is what's going on, and there is no excuse, and wants to see what is the actual damage and assess that and make sure that they will get their oil as soon as possible. But if I was to bet any money, I would say that the oil won't be flowing anytime soon, if at all, through this pipeline for those reasons. Of course, this is a difficult situation for Orban and for Slovakia. And the fact that the sanctions are targeting the ships is not here without merit, because clearly if they cannot get the oil via Druzhba, they will have to get the oil elsewhere. And the elsewhere is, of course, via sea. And of course, this means the oil will be flowing from a different side, but still, Hungary hopes it's going to be Russian oil. And that's again due to several reasons. Price being one reason, but also political gains being yet another reason. And technological elements are also important, take into consideration that the infrastructure in Hungary is mostly adjusted to the Russian oil, which is different in quality than let's say Brent oil.
I see. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas. Yes. So, Wojtek, Thomas just mentioned that Hungary is in a kind of a desperate position. He also said that it might be interested in getting oil through maritime pipelines potentially, but we know that this is also quite challenging given that Croatia actually prohibited certain supplies starting from this year. So, in your opinion, is this why Orban and Fico resort to the language of ultimatums here this time? And maybe does it have anything to do with the upcoming elections in Hungary?
Well, it all has to do with elections and political corruption, to put it bluntly. The schemes that have been allowing political leaders to relate the powers that they hold to the type of redistribution models related to the income generated by the fossil fuels flowing from Russia is a general pattern of dependency we have seen in a number of countries of Central Eastern Europe, with the two remaining countries still resorting to this dependency at a heavy price of political freedom. Because the options of Mr. Orban or Mr. Fico are not decided that much in their capitals. So contrary to their narrative, they're not so sovereign in their decisions about political decisions. They're much more decided by those who hold the tap and who hold also control of the flow of capital that allows them to hold power. This is at the most rudimentary level of analysis. A couple of words to say about it. Mr. Orban here is in more precarious situation because elections are nigh, and according to independent polls, he's trailing 12% points among all the voters behind the TISA party, which still doesn't mean he's losing the total number of majority in the final vote in the parliament, but is in serious trouble when it comes to exerting also the symbolic power over the government and the political leadership in his own country. So he's resorting to every potential trick he has in diverting the attention of the public and his electorate towards the appointed enemy. He's governing, and his political marketing style is very much known for being able to appoint an enemy out of nowhere and then target this enemy for allowing the distribution of hate in the electorate instead of distribution of public services or general well-being in terms of economic performance. And in this case, this is Ukraine. So Ukraine is a target here of the political marketing campaigning for quite some time now. Ukraine that was non-existent in political marketing of Hungarian government before 22 that much, but it has been existent since then because it allowed Viktor Orban to be re-elected 4 years ago when he campaigned on the message of peace versus war and campaigned against Ukraine straightforwardly. And now he tries to rekindle that. And he uses every example from the past protests in which he could identify and build a story of Ukraine allegedly meddling, which is not to our fact-finding true, in protests in Budapest, and describing the Ukrainian element in Hungary or related to Hungary as the element of danger, as an element of conflict, an element of his own narrative, of his own making. Like previously, he has been targeting a number of EU elites, Brussels leaders, Brussels-based leaders. Previously, Mr. Soros, one of the Hungarian Jewish philanthropists based in the US. So that's a typical repetitive mechanism that has been allowing Orban to be successful, and he definitely wants to use it. He also probably sincerely hopes that he can pressure Ukrainians into submission, into getting the oil flow restored to come back. And he also pressures a number of European allies, EU countries, to support him in his claim, making sure that they are also distancing their support or distancing from Ukraine and limiting in the full support of the Kyiv government.
Mm-hmm.
If I interject here, just a few words more about the ultimatum, and because this is the word that you used, and the recent history teaches us that the ones that are making ultimatums in recent times do not end up on top. Let's put it this way, and they have very often have to track back pretty shamelessly. We all remember Taco, which is coming back from time to time, still even now. So Taco means Trump always chickens out. Yeah, that's the abbreviation. So he is the one about a lot of ultimatums that he then is unable to go through with. So here I wouldn't say that the strength is on the side of Orban, and he may get more and more nervous as we approach, well, the elections that are in what, month and a half, and he may get more and more nervous seeing that Ukrainians are not beaten in submission.
Absolutely. But what cards does Ukraine have in this overall game of scapegoating, in your opinion, Thomas?
Well, here we are going back to cards and the Trump. Yeah, apparently resilience is a very important card that is important in today's world, which Ukraine clearly shown that if you are able to resist hard enough and long enough, then you can get far more than you expected. Not that the Ukraine did get it yet, but it seems it might be getting far more than it was expected. Well, same can be said, of course, to be determined about the final details but Iran. Again, it seems Trump was going for 3-day special operation, and it doesn't look like he's going to succeed either. So resilience is definitely on the side of Ukraine here, looking from this perspective. Assuming that there is a regime change in Hungary, there might be some negotiations to help out the new government, and then those are the cards that Ukraine then has of restoring the flow of oil and maybe gas, but I'm not sure whether politically this will be acceptable there. So, of course, Hungary can block sanctions, can block money for some time at least. It of course won't change the current situation that much, but definitely Orban is far more pressed for time because, well, month and a half is not something that Ukraine cannot survive, especially that the spring is coming, and the demand for energy, and that's the ultimatum that was basically given, that we won't stabilize our system if you want to return the oil flow, that the demand for energy and distributed energy generation is working better and better.
If I might just interject, because we missed one important element of the ultimate and the pressing point Orban applies is also the blockade of the 90 billion loan from EU to Ukraine, that Hungary does not participate financially in repaying or guaranteeing it. But nevertheless, it is part of the EU agreed mechanism, and Hungarian ambassador was blocking it under the obligation to have unanimity of all the member states. So here is a pressure point on Ukraine, and Ukraine here is in a weaker situation, so to say, has a weaker card, because the financial situation in Ukraine, public finance, requires a constant flow of money. The second point on the oil flows and ability of Ukraine to restore it, it's probably true, as you say, that Ukraine could do that. But there is also a transition that is both expected and agreed within the EU, that, as I said, the countries are withdrawing from their Russian dependencies of the fossil fuels. And secondly, once Hungary would potentially accept a different than Russian crude oil for its refinery, the retrofitting process, which already started for the refineries, to start accepting other than Russian crude oil of different chemical composition, would irreversibly change the dependency also, which is important. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires investment, and it requires also a certain decision that is a political decision. A contractual obligation must come with it. So it's a process, and it will be definitely a difficult process because it's a costly process for the Hungarian side. We see how the Croat government is essentially day and night. The Croat, I do recommend following this gentleman especially on Twitter. His name is the minister, Croat minister of economy, and Mr. Ante Shushnyar is day and night communicating how Adria pipeline can deliver both to Hungary and to Slovakia all the needs that both countries have, claiming that Croatia pipeline can deliver the volumes necessary. But he always omits to say that this will never be the type of chemical composition required or not even originating from Russia, but it would have to be the Russian most likely, but also in terms of what it would deliver would also change the nature of dependency. The new government in Hungary, if it is changing, having Anita Orban, not related name to the prime minister of the current government, has already pledged that she would look north to the north-south connectivity, indicating that she would be, and the government would be willing to work on different types of dependencies and interdependencies for at least for Hungary, in order to change it. But of course, nobody speaks of the costs, and Ukraine may be helpful here in a sense of easing the pressure, allowing for the transition to happen. But I think they will not abandon a general direction of trying to cut this cord completely, because it basically
Okay, so just to wrap up the discussion, thank you very much, Wojciech. So, Tomasz, in light of what is going on in Iran right now with the US strikes on Iran, and the potential is, a lot of people are saying that the oil market is going to be not in shambles, but very significantly impacted by what is going on. Do you think that the alternatives will still remain the same for Orban, or you think that the current crisis would potentially shift his stances towards the whole issue?
Well, that's a big problem for everyone. It's not only the Orban's problem right now. And depending on what's going on in Iran, we can see possibly that actually the Russia's position might strengthen. Yeah, because currently what we are observing are very short-term problems with logistics mostly. Yeah, so the transfer of oil is blocked or prolonged, depending on what we are talking exactly about. So it's somewhat of a problem, but it's not the major problem. The major problem is something that we're already starting to observe, which are the attacks on the oil infrastructure all around the Middle East. All of it is basically within Iran's range, and if this situation is prolonged, we may see more and more oil fields and other infrastructure being attacked. And this is a problem that may have far more reaching consequences than just a brief problem, logistic problem. I see Wojtek wants to say something very badly. No?
Yeah. Since we're talking about conflicts, I have just one quote to share from just over 50 minutes ago, but happy to share it in a moment. But you're right, Tomasz. Yeah.
Okay. So we need to look at what's going on, yeah, because for now Orban cares mostly about the Russian oil, but this is much broader picture, and we really should look very carefully at how the situation is developing in the Middle East and how the production capacity is utilized, and how is it, in what shape is it? So that's a huge problem looking at that. And when that happens, we'll see switches and flows in the oil market. China, of course, can always tap into Russia, which it doesn't, which is not using very extensively right now, and Russia would like to have more of the clients, especially at the higher prices that we are observing right now. So this is definitely something we should be wary. This is also influencing Orban, because then the premium that he can use to redistribute to his cronies is shrinking, basically, as the difference in oil prices is different. So. Here, I'm not trying to predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but the situation is really precarious.
Wojtek, do you have a quote for us to finish?
I have one quote. I'll save the quote for the second point. My first point is that cutting off oil supplies from Iran, first from Venezuela, now from Iran to China, puts additional pressures on China that demands supplies from Russia. And that global shift, which we don't know how long it will last, pulls away the resource to a certain extent, or at least the attention Russia would have towards Orban and Slovakia, because they need to answer the call. Now, I'm not an energy market expert. We are following a number of those. But this logic is crystal clear, and we're already reading signals that Russia is turning towards its most important, significant party that it's dependent on, also financially, to answer whatever demands China might need. So look at this if you want to also understand the dynamics, because the global tensions there in both in Venezuela and Iran, in terms of oil, and also this critical type of oil production, maybe also shifting part or maybe playing some cards in the local Central Eastern European context. Now the quote from about an hour ago from Zelensky: "We'll give Orban's address to our armed forces. Let them call him and speak to him in their own language." I think the situation in Iran, the situation previously in Venezuela, openly invites stronger language for the time being, and I keep fingers crossed, symbolic language for the type of leaders we're talking about to use it against each other and to provide to do some posturing that hopefully we won't see the consequences of. But the global turmoil also is pronounced in the local context much more, as the animosity between them is clearly on the increase and on the rise, and the bar of what's permitted, what's allowed between civilized nations otherwise is dropping. So we're gonna see probably more of that, more of aggressive tone on both sides. And I hope we're not going to go much further with it, but my hopes are not met with my analytical pessimism.
Okay, there is no better end to the recorded part of our discussion. So we are wrapping up the first part, and now